The old, creaking house had always been the source of mystery and intrigue in the small town of Brimstone. Generations had come and gone, but the sinister mansion sat perched atop the hill, watching over the town and its inhabitants like a ravenous predator, waiting for its next meal. The old house had been empty for decades, but it still exuded an eerie, oppressive energy that hung over the residents like a thick, suffocating fog. Nobody knew its true history or the terrible secrets that lay within its walls, but everyone knew to stay far away from the house's attics and basements, where most of the shadows and whispered secrets were said to lurk. One fateful evening, a family of 3 moved into the house, drawn by its grandeur and mystery. The family consisted of Marianne, a celebrated novelist, her husband, Robert, a retired banker, and their daughter, Emily. They thought it was the perfect place to set down roots in their golden years, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. The house was everything they'd ever wanted: towering walls of stone, a sprawling, unkempt garden, and centuries-old furniture that spoke of elegance and grandeur. However, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as they began to explore their new home. From the beginning, their attic had always given them the chills. The family didn't know why, but it had an unnerving presence like none of the other rooms in the house. The day after they moved in, Marianne went up into the attic to start unpacking boxes. She had barely opened the first box when she heard a whisper coming from the corner of the room. It was a barely audible sound, but it echoed around the attic with a menacing intensity that left her heart racing. Marianne tried to ignore it, but as she started digging through old, dusty books between the boxes, looking for inspiration, the whispers got louder and more clear. As Marianne listened more closely, she realized that the whispers were coming from the room next door. Each time she tried to get closer, the whispers got louder and more frantic, as though something was urging her to stop listening. She forced herself to run out of the attic and back down the stairs into the safety of her family's embrace. Despite the terrifying experience, Marianne tried to convince herself that it was just her nerves getting the better of her. Robert, on the other hand, had his own experiences with the disturbing presence in the attic. He would often hear footsteps coming from the attic when no one else was upstairs, and his nightmares worsened every night despite the sound of his daughter sleeping soundly in the next room. It wasn't until Emily began behaving strangely that the family was forced to confront the malevolence lurking beneath their home's surface. Emily, who was usually bubbly and exuberant, would sometimes wander the halls of the house, speaking to someone who wasn't there. At other times, she would stare up at the attic, transfixed by something she couldn't put into words. Marianne and Robert were concerned, but they chalked it up to an overactive imagination and missing her old friends from the city. One night, Marianne woke up to find Emily sleepwalking towards the embedded stairs that led up to the attic. She followed her daughter, afraid of what was happening. Emily's eyes were half shut, and she clutched an old, tarnished locket. Marianne tried to shake Emily awake, but the girl refused to budge, her little feet moving towards the attic's eerie entrance. Marianne managed to get a hold of Emily just as she was about to climb the stairs, but at that moment, she saw a cluster of dark shapes moving towards them, or from within them. Marianne screamed as she pulled Emily towards the safety of their bedroom before slamming the door shut, panting and gasping for breath. Every corner held a new horror, and every whisper became more unbearable. Strange things started happening, things moving on their own, furniture rearranging itself, and insidious laughter echoing in the halls. The more scared they became, the louder and more persistent the whispers got. Now, they knew that they were not alone in the house. Something dark and sinister had taken obsession with them, or maybe, it was the family's own obsession with the stories they had imagined that the house had allowed them to experience. The family was never able to shake off the haunting and finally decided to move out. It was only when they were halfway through moving boxes when Marianne came across an old diary hidden in the attic, which spoke of the house's dark past. The diary belonged to a woman who had been locked in the attic by her husband, seemingly because of her insistence on her own freedom. As the family left the house and the town, they let out a collective sigh of relief. Robert turned to Marianne, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for convincing me to leave. I don't think I could have stayed any longer," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and fear. "I'm just glad we're out of there," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That house was cursed, and I don't want to ever go back," she added. Emily, who had been silent for most of the ride, suddenly spoke up. "What do you think happened to the woman in the diary?" she asked, her voice trembling with fear. Marianne and Robert exchanged glances, unsure of how to answer. "I'm not sure, sweetie," Marianne finally said, keeping her voice as calm as possible. "But we're out of there now, and that's what matters." As the family drove further and further away from Brimstone, the whispers grew fainter and fainter until they disappeared completely. The family was finally able to relax and enjoy their journey, grateful to be out of the cursed mansion. But the relief was short-lived. As they settled into their new home and tried to move on from their experience, strange things began to happen. The whispers were back, and this time, they were louder and more insistent than ever before. The family could feel a dark presence haunting them, following their every move, and they knew that their escape from the mansion had only been temporary. Marianne and Robert tried everything to get rid of the presence, but nothing seemed to work. They consulted priests, mediums, and even tried to sell the house, but no one would take it off their hands. They were trapped, and the whispers that had once been localized in the attic now permeated through every single room in their new home. As they sat at the dinner table one night, Emily suddenly froze, her eyes fixed on a point behind them. Before any of them could react, Emily let out a blood-curdling scream, and the lights went out. They sat in complete darkness, the only sound that of Emily sobbing in terror. As they fumbled around for a flashlight and matches, Marianne realized something that made her blood run cold. They were no longer being watched, they were being hunted. It was then that they realized the whispers had never been coming from the attic in the old mansion. The whispers had been coming from the dark thing that had followed them all the way to their new home, waiting until the time was right to strike. To this day, the family of 3 is still living in that house, still plagued by the whispers that never stop. The mansion remains an unrested curse, waiting for its next victim, leading to endless whispers in the attic.